You are listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Cali Estes and Master Coach Jenny Fontana, founders of the Life Coach Method. Each one of our uplifting and deep dive episodes is geared to help you tackle the things that hold you back from having the most magnificent life you deserve. Sit back, relax, and prepare to be coached.
Welcome to another episode of Unpause Your Life. I am Dr. Cali Estes, and my next guest, wow, what a fantastic, colorful story. I thought I had a colorful story. This beats mine. Stick around and listen to this. We're going to talk about drug addiction. We're going to talk about homelessness. We're going to talk about being in a coma. All that's pretty normal. We're also going to talk about trying to kill his mother. That's a little not normal, but that'll be fun to talk about, and how he wrote a book, and he's a recovery coach and pulled himself out of the fire. So welcome, Ryan Penley.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I have become a fan of Dr. Cali Estes, so to spend some more time with you and this jovial interchanging, this correspondence is fun. So I'm excited, super excited.
Well, I'm excited to hear this story. So start me off with, I don't know, childhood maybe, where you are, how you get to Vegas, how you get to Colorado, all of this. Give me your story.
Yeah,
I'm going to shut my mouth and let you talk.
Like super early, right? I had a few beers and I had enough balls to go talk to some girls. It was like, this is awesome. All right, all upside. I'm funny, or at least I thought I was funny, and that was like the spark of it, right? And I was like, okay, I really like this, and I decided to make a profession of it. So I started bartending, right? And so becoming a bartender here in Florida was like pretty cool. But then it was like, well, I want to bring this to the next level. So I go to Vegas. I go right into the belly of the beast. If you want to get to the highest or to the pinnacle of bartending, that's where you go. And so here I am. I'm 22. I'm in Vegas, and things were like, honestly, Vegas has a finite span that you can exist there for pretty much anybody. They always joke that you always leave broke, and I believe that to be true, right? So I lasted 11 years. That's a long time. I had friends that came and stayed with me like 36 hours. I'm like, get the hell out of here. You're going to die. You are not going to make it another 3 days. Like, you're done. And so I did well in that respect, right? So I go to Vegas. I'm bartending on the strip. I got cash. And I'm doing okay in respect to the addiction and the alcoholism as far as the severity, right? Why? Because I'm functioning and I'm traveling and I got some money and I'm in decent shape and things are going, I guess, rather well. But I'm further embedding myself into the normalcy of cocaine and booze. It's like it's normal to just drink until 9 a.m. It's normal to, sleep between 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. and then struggle to get to work at 8 p.m. So I further sunk myself into the livelihood that was basically alcohol on the surface, but then of course drugs on underneath the surface, but not very far underneath the surface. It was, just maybe scratch the surface and the cocaine just comes right out of the situation. So, but again, I kind of did well until I broke my leg, and that's where the pills kind of came into the mix, right? So now, like, I had this green light of drug addiction, right? And it was kind of in the heyday. This is 2010, right? So I broke my leg. What do they give me? 220 30 milligram roxycodones a month. So
oh, shit, they just dumped it right on you. Yeah, this is right back when the pill mills were up.
Oh yeah. And just, for you, obviously knowing like how potent those pills are, how versatile they are, they can be crushed up, they could be diluted in water. I mean, the applicability of a drug, it's like super high potent, super high grade. And so what does that equal? Super high addict, right? And so I was full blown. And at first I'm like, oh, I'm going to sell some of these and make some money, right? And then before I knew it, it wasn't enough, right? Like, it was, the 220 was gone halfway through the month. I'm like, oh shit, I gotta figure this out, and so anyways, it kind of unraveled pretty quick. And I don't blame like the doctors, and I don't blame the system, although many people in my life are like, oh, well, it wasn't your fault. And that's not how I roll. And I think it's also how I got better, right? Like, I don't place the blame on them. I mean, yeah, they made it possible for me to get those drugs very cheap and very easily. However, I'm the one that put them into my mouth or snorted them up my nose or whatever. And so, things that was a very big fork in the road. That's when things kind of turned, things turned for the worse. Then I was like, okay, it got ugly. I lost my job. So I lost my cash, lost my insurance, lost my pills. So then what, like usually this is kind of where some people might go with the street heroin route or maybe this route. But what I ended up doing is trying to solve my problems by getting the hell out of Vegas, which is not a bad move, but it doesn't cure things, right? Because you always bring yourself wherever you end up. I go to Colorado and I go to a town of like 6,000 people. And you'd think like, okay, that's a small town. There's probably more elk than there are people, but I have an amazing ability to find narcotics like in like in anywhere, right? Like you put me into that town, it's like I could figure out. It's like I could smell cocaine and narcotics anywhere, and so I'm like a bloodhound. And so that's what I was using as my special power there, So it didn't put much of a dent into my problems, even though I thought it would. So here I am, full blown addict. Things have gotten a bit worse, and my health started to decline. This is where I developed diabetes, and I was unknowingly, right? So I'm like, I'm not, I don't have diabetes. In fact, I would just tell people I don't, thinking that was an advantageous move to like dodge an actual condition. And so, people were concerned. I started getting really bad jaundice. My eyes were turning yellow. My organs were shutting down. And so, a friend of mine, he took, well, side note, I was wanted in 3 states at this time. So I was wanted in Florida, I was wanted in Las Vegas, or Nevada, and I was also wanted in Colorado. Mostly traffic violations or possession. That's pretty much where we're at. But I stayed out of trouble. I hid well, and somebody turned me in. A buddy of mine turned me in, thinking that would get me better. Well, what ended up happening is that I get out. A buddy of mine gets me out of jail. He pops me out of there, bails me out. And I had these sugar cravings. And so what happens is I'm actually not high. I'm not drunk. I'm not high. And I'm somewhat sober. But right, Dr. Cali, like that window of sobriety, that first, like, this is some of the most dangerous times for a person that is a severe alcoholic. Why? Because, you've got seizures. It's so dangerous to like go cold turkey.
So
and here I am. Go ahead.
back me up. You detoxed in jail off of alcohol.
Right. And so it was a bit trumped by the diabetes, which I unknowingly, like, I thought I was detoxing. I was like, okay, I was only in there for like, I don't know, 36 hours. He got me out pretty quick. But when I got out, I just craved sugar. And I craved sugar. Like, it was like I was a vampire or something. So, I maybe had like a few bucks to my name, and I bought like an 84-ounce cup and just filled it with Mountain Dew. Still fighting and, not realizing I'm diabetic. So when I chugged this thing, right, I basically was committing suicide. My body temperature went down to like 85 degrees. And my buddy, who at the time, he knew that I was wanted. He didn't want to call anybody, but I had defecated on myself. My body temperature went to nothing, right? I was incoherent. I had vomited on his couch, and he was like so confused. Not for a couple of reasons, probably because he wasn't sober at the time, but he wouldn't call anybody. Eventually, another friend is like, you got to get him out of here. So they sent in a helicopter because that town was so small, there was no triage, right? So here I am, pretty much dead. They fly me to a town where they could triage me, and my blood sugar was 1100, which is,
Wow.
yeah. They said they didn't even know that was a possibility. So my weight, I was in a coma for, I don't know, 7 days, something like that. And I come out, right? So back on the sobriety train, like, everybody's like, oh, that's when you turned your life around. And I'm like, no, I'm incredibly resilient when it comes to being a total asshole. And so I was like, I am going to make sure I'm going to dig till this granite is like, I got to make sure that I'm at the basement of rock bottom. And so I moved to Florida with my family.
Wait, hang on. Back me up to the hospital. So you're in a coma. Was it drug induced, or it was just you were in a coma because your body shut down? Did they do
Diabetes.
it, or did you do it?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. I just know I was rather dead. Like I was like, I was like unresponsive, my body temperature. I mean, that's all I really know. Because when they told me I was in a helicopter, I was like, really? And they were
Do you have
like,
pictures?
and I'm like, I don't remember that. They're like, yeah, because you were freaking dead, man. Like, of course you don't remember being in the helicopter, you idiot. Like, but that's how far gone my mind was. Like, I was like, so when I did wake up in the hospital, I had a port in my chest. They had, I was like somewhat inverted. There was a whole bunch of things. They were working hard on me, seriously. And there was also, and this is actually in my book, is I was surrounded by like, I don't know, 8 to 9 people that really cared about me. Now, I don't know if those people hadn't have been there, I don't even know if I would have woken up. I really don't know. But I did wake up to having a lot of people that really cared, and they had been there for days. So that was, it should have been the turnaround, really, but it wasn't, because as I had mentioned,
What was going through your head when you woke up? What was your first thought? You wake up, you're in the hospital, you got all these things attached to you, and there's all these people standing around. What's your first thought?
I got to be honest, I was so clueless because I wasn't suffering, if that makes sense, right? I was in a coma, and people, like the people around me, were suffering, but it took me years to even scratch the surface at how much suffering I had caused them. I truly, truly, like, I was so oblivious, and I just, I would say I was clueless. I was totally clueless. My body weight, like I'm at like 205 now, right? Like at the time, I think I was at like 155. I mean, I was a skeleton. I was a skeleton. My organs were starting to shut down. Like I said, I had jaundice, but I couldn't see it. I would look in the mirror. I had no idea. I was completely clueless. And I continued to be that clueless for quite some time. Everybody wanted me to get better. So many people were so desperate to make it. I mean, even the guy that turned me in, he was desperate for me to get better. I understand that now, but at the time, like it wasn't even on my radar. I couldn't even tell you how many doctors come in there and had a conversation with me, a heartfelt conversation, like, you're going to die. Like, if you don't do something, you're going to die. And I was just like, it was like I was impervious to their care. I really was. And so, yeah, so what was going through my head? Shit. I was like going there, like I wasn't thinking about nothing. I wasn't even thankful that I was alive. I wasn't even thinking about, I was just like, oh, okay. Hey guys. Like I was so oblivious that I wasn't even thankful. I wasn't even grateful. And it's it's a crime, really. It's a crime at how bad it was. I was sick, I was out of my mind. So hopefully I answered your question. I mean, but
Yeah, because it takes me back to when my husband got, side railed with his artery that burst. He was the same way. He wakes up with an incubator, and his first thought was, fuck, I can't get high. How do I get Dilaudid? How do I get opiates? How do I get these people to give me more? That was his first thought. Not, I almost died and my wife just signed end of death papers. It's completely different. So I wanted to see how that was for you because you're sober now. So, okay, so now you're sober. You're in this bed. Where do you go next?
yeah. So now that's a tricky statement, because I mean, I was not on drugs or alcohol, but I wasn't sober here, right? Like I wasn't currently on anything, but I wasn't sober here. And so what do I do again? I go to Florida. I'm with my family. So now I've geographically relocated again, right? And now I've added some support, but I'm still not here, right? And so things got nasty, right? Like, and I know that what I'm describing here sounds rather nasty, but so now I've got no drugs, I've got no money, and I'm back with my family. So I'm leeching onto them when I can, using everybody, anybody that was willing to sign up to be an enabler, I was happy to manipulate, right? So here I am back in Florida, but that's where, things kind of really got pretty ugly, right? Like I was just hanging on by a thread, and it continued on. But so now where am I at as far as my use goes? Well, the cheapest thing that you can really get is like a liter of vodka from like ABC Liquor. It's like $6 for like a liter of vodka. And I mean, there's very few things on planet Earth that are as toxic and as potent, or as just I mean, gut wrenching. Even now, like I can like taste it. It's like, it is the worst, but it is the cheapest. So it's easy to get a hold of. And so I kind of, distilled my usage to just booze because it was around, whether I had to steal it, buy it, whatever it was. I mean, and so, I limped along for years after that. And then, kind of like, as you had pointed out, well, as we were talking about my mother, right? My mother, she's an active addiction. And she's also, still drinking heavily, despite her health completely deteriorating. Right? One thing I could say for my bloodline is like, we're like cockroaches. Like you just cannot kill us. It's just, it's proven. And so here's my mother. The best idea, right? Let's move in with my mom. We'll just combine efforts here. And so, it was probably the worst mistake in the slew of mistakes that I had kind of made once I got back to Florida. But that was maybe one of the worst ones. Why? Because we just compounded our sickness on top of each other, right? They had me on medication to prevent seizures from not drinking, although I was continuing to drink. So what was that? I think I can't remember the name of it, but nonetheless, it was.
Ativan.
I think it was Ativan. I didn't want to say Xanax because it wasn't something like that strong, but it was not good because now we're just throwing it into the pot, right? So between the two of us, we're drinking, we're not even partying, we're not even really talking to each other. We're just like co-abusing under the same roof. But then things got pretty nasty, and the both of us. I mean, I don't remember much. I saw the police footage, and I was rather put together. I was like speaking quite well. It seemed like I was rather composed, but then I'm sitting in jail for like a month. I'm like, man, I've been in here for like a while. I mean, I wonder, this isn't like a drunk hold. I'm like, man, I'm starting to get concerned. And then I read the police report, and my mother said that I tried to cut her head off with a kitchen knife. And so, what are the charges, right? Attempted murder with a deadly weapon. I think assault and battery. I'm going down from like the worst to like the least worst. There was like 3 real heavy charges on there, but it was it was tough to see that she had wrote that down. And so it wasn't the pivot moment, but it was one of the times that I kind of reeled back and knew I couldn't screw around anymore. Meaning I had to report to probation. I had to comply if I ever hoped to have a future. And I got the hell away from my mom. And that's still to this day kind of how those cards have played out. But so here I have this charge, right? I still currently wanted in those 3 states, but now I have new charges in Florida. And so I started getting to work though in one more than a few ways, right? I started making efforts, but I still wasn't well. I still wasn't sober. I wasn't sober-minded, so I kept slipping. And when I would slip, a lot of times I would be Baker acted. So I want to say you know what Baker acted is, but maybe for anybody that's listening, if they don't know, in the state of Florida, like if you're a risk of either harming yourself or others, you are detained in a mental hospital for like 72 hours. And so you're not arrested, which is good, but they put you into these clinics. All right. And now the good news is that they'll kind of help you out with maybe, some medications to take the edge off and some things like that. But when I first kind of went, like, let's call it the first 5 times, I'm like, I can't I got to get the hell out of here, and I got to get drunk and high again. I got to figure this out. I got to get out of here so I can get back to what I was doing. And then if you want to like add on another 5 or 6 or however many times, I still don't, to this day, I'm not even quite sure of how many times I was Baker acted. But once I started approaching like a dozen times, I was like trying to use the Baker Act as like a launch pad for sobriety. So I would take the 72 hours. I'm like, okay, I've made it through that without seizures, hopefully. And if I have, I'm like, okay, now I have at least like kind of like a shaky leg to stand on that I can try to move forward with my sobriety. And so then I found myself like towards the end or the higher, I don't know, call it 12, 13, 14th time Baker Act, I'd be begging, like, send me with resources, please. Where can I go? Where can I get help? And I was still having a hard time finding that help, but they would let me out. And so honestly, and I have this posted many places on my website and things like that. You fall down 7 times, get up 8, right? That's a biblical phrase. And the way that, and I interpret that is, it doesn't matter how many times that you fall down, you just have to get up the last time and stay up the last time, right? And so basically, I just kept trying, kept failing, kept trying, kept failing. I get Baker Act, I get out, I try to use it as a launch pad, and then I got my cousin back involved, and this is where I started really using applicable ways to maintain sobriety, right? And so what did that include? It included, I got a breathalyzer, and I gave it to my cousin, and I made a plan. I said, listen,
Wait a minute. I've got to back you up 1 second. You figured out how to get sober by yourself. That's what I'm hearing. There's like no therapy, no rehab, no resources. You're asking
Right.
for resources, but you're not getting your needs met for help.
That's true.
Okay.
Right.
I want to make that clear, because I just want to stop for 1 second. That I hear that over and over and over and over and over again with people, that there just isn't the right stuff. So now tell us what you did.
Right. Well, I went back to my cousin, and that was a moment of humility, because I had lived with her before, but I was still so far off mentally. You know, I was like taking her husband's booze. It was all, it got murky, it got ugly, and I was still not humble, and I was still kind of like not cognizant of my problem. And so there was a lot of pushback, and so I had to basically crawl back to her and her husband, but with a plan this time. I knew that they just wouldn't let me back into the house. I had to come prepared with an offering of some type, right? And so what did it look like? Well, I had to implement some kind of accountability. So we got a breathalyzer, and I think I may have purchased it. I had no money, but I basically used every resource that I could to get this breathalyzer. I said, okay, I'm gonna breathe into this thing. Let me backtrack a little bit. I ended up getting a job by a place that didn't do a background check. Even though they said they did a background check, they didn't do a background check, right? Because they wouldn't have hired me. And so when they hired me, I was like, so that came back all right? They're like, oh yeah. I'm like, oh, all right. Like, so I'm like working in retail, like kind of just keeping quiet. Anyways, I had a job, right? It wasn't all that great, but I was like, okay. And then I had at least that piece of the puzzle, and that helped me when I presented myself to my cousin. And I said, okay, here's my accountability. Here's the breathalyzer. I'm blowing it every day. I mean, if I blow hot, it's it. I'm out of here. No questions asked. That's just what it is. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to fight. It is just what it is. And I was like, I expect you to hold me to that. And so there's the breathalyzer, and then there were some other agreements. Like I said, I'd go to AA once a week. She actually got me to work with her therapist. So I had more support, even from her, more so than I ever had in the past. And so AA never worked out for me. I had a hard time going in there, and I think, even as like a recovery coach, and kind of what you talk about, forward thinking instead of like addressing the past. I had a hard time talking about the past. And I also had a hard time identifying and repeating that I was an alcoholic. Those were my two bugaboos as far as when I was in the rooms. And so it didn't work out for me, even though I feel like it's such a massive resource for so many people. It just wasn't in the cards for me. However, it was a part of this original plan. And so, I had the plan together. And honestly, that was when I went to her and she took me back in and we implemented that. It was what turned the tides. When I had all those pieces to the puzzle, that's when I really stood a chance. And so anyways, yeah, I mean to your point, I guess, I kind of made it by the skin of my teeth, but that was March 31st, 2019. So it's been since then.
Okay, so my question is, what happened with this charge with your mom? Was the charge dropped?
Right. And so I played by the rules. And they kind of give you a get out of jail free card, but they kind of let it go. Like if you follow the rules and somebody's made an accusation of you like that, they kind of say, all right, well, we're going to give you the benefit of the doubt. And that's kind of where I ended up. Now, here's the problem. Depending on what you run into in life, whatever it may look like for instance, renting anything as far as a domicile goes, they're going to run an arrest report. They're not going to check and see if whether or not you are a convicted felon. They're going to look at your arrest, and that won't ever go away. That arrest from that day, it will remain on my record. I cannot get it off. There's no possibility of doing so. So I run into issues with it occasionally. And so I basically had to earn and make enough cash to where I just pay cash for these because it's just like, because I don't have an option, right? If I tell somebody, if anybody takes a look, I mean, God, dating at first, like I remember this girl ran a background check on me. She had her own business, so she had the resources to run a background check. It was like 6 pages, and we're on our like third date, and I'm like, what the hell are you thinking? I'm looking at my own. I'm like, I'm looking at it, I'm like, you chose to like get back in the car with me after you saw this? And it was it was daunting, and it still is. But I guess adjudication withheld is the technical end result of that charge. So that's kind of what ended up happening. And so, and my mother, she's still out there. My sister occasionally talks to her, but she's still out there doing the grind. She's like living with addicts and stuff like that, hard times.
Wow. Okay. So now fast forward me to how you got here. You've got a book, you've got a podcast, you're a certified recovery coach, level 2. How'd you get here to helping people from a breathalyzer at your cousin's house, praying by the day just to get through the day? How'd you get here?
Well, and I think we were talking about this before we hit record, but knowing a little tiny piece of your story with doing the squats, whenever you start approaching the refrigerator, and you would do a pattern interrupt, and you interrupt it with physical activity. One of like those. So I'm at my cousin's house. I made that agreement with the breathalyzer and stuff like that. But there was my own personal agreement with myself was I was going to do 2 minutes of jumping jacks a day. 2 minutes of cumulative, not straight, like 15 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever it was. But I mean, I have so seldom committed to something as much as I committed to that. And it might sound ridiculous and so small, but I feel wholeheartedly that's where you need to begin. Even when I was putting down the bottle, like when I first started trying to become sober and not pick up booze, it was a 15-minute window. That's all I could. And I failed at that several times. I was like, I'm not picking up the bottle for 15 minutes. And I'd pick it up 12 minutes in, and I'm like, damn, I failed again. And so stretching wherever you start out, whatever you can do. It's not about what people should do. It's about what you will do, right? So what I figured out I could and will do was 2 minutes of jumping jacks. And so the only goal for a very long time, for all of my being, was to do 2 minutes of jumping jacks, right? And I did it. And I did it, and the first few days, I felt like I got hit by a truck. Literally, my ankles hurt. But by the way, at this time, I was around 275 pounds. So it was hard. And so like I started with something so minuscule, but I built on it. And that 2 minutes turned into 3 minutes. But then that 3 minutes turned into full-blown workouts, turned into me being a personal trainer about 6 months after that, turned into me having like 12% body fat a year out from that, right? Turned into furthering my professional career. And so it just stacked. But the reason why I bring up those 2 minutes of jumping jacks is because wherever the hell you got to start, however small it may be, whatever you're able to handle, that's where you got to begin. And then you literally just stack on it. And it starts to grow exponentially. And people underestimate that so often. So how did I get here? Writing a book, doing a podcast and stuff like that at an exponential rate. I mean, it's been 6 years since I got sober, right? It's literally starting to where I could handle it and still push myself a little bit. I mean, that 2 minutes was hard, but that's where it began. And so then I just stacked that on top of each other. But it wasn't just physical activity. It was also nutrition, and it was also learning and developing and getting certifications and going on and having enough guts to have conversations about hard things over time. And so if you take the culmination of all of that, right, the progress, it gets faster, right? And that's the Matthew principle. To everybody, to who has a lot will be given everything, right? And there's some real truth in that. But if you don't have the humility to start with something ridiculous as 10 squats or 2 minutes of jumping jacks or whatever it may be, if you don't have that humility, then you will never begin, and then you will never see that exponential growth. And so it's kind of where it started.
That is wow, just wow. Yeah, so it's very similar to me, where you went to the meetings, it didn't work, you found nutrition, you found fitness, and that's the thing that got you sober. Now tell us about your book. You have a book called Man Up, Sober Up. What who is that for? What's it about? Is it the whole story of your journey? What's the purpose behind the book?
I wanted I wanted to I wanted to have the guts to tell my story, and I suppose now I'm running my mouth like a, you know, like a maniac, but it wasn't like that, right? And there was a lot of shame, and when I found it so cathartic to start writing, and when I had done it, like hit me like a lightning bolt, and so it just began me like basically journaling about the times with my mother, or Colorado, or you know, being arrested, all these things. It started off like as like a therapeutic release, and then I was like, okay, maybe I can organize this, and then I'm like, you know what, I don't think it's enough to just tell the story, because I wanted it to be applicable. And so what I had conjoined is both, you know, story, so it's part memoir and then part strategies and tactics that I had used and that I had borrowed from people much smarter than myself. And so I kind of compiled those two prongs, right? It's my personal story and rock bottom moments, and then coupled with strategies that I had used along the way to kind of get that exponential growth, and kind of make that happen. So I go into, you know, the different escapades of you know, being in Colorado, living in Las Vegas, some of the dark moments, and then I try to turn it around and show people maybe the tools that can reverse some of those scenarios, right? So two things are happening. People don't feel like they're alone, and then also like what to do next. Because I mean, you and I both working with people, it's like so seldom does somebody know what to do first or next, right? They might, if they have the advantage of knowing where they're at, they don't know where to go next. And so I think that's really what I'm trying to tackle there in the book.
That's awesome. And that's on Amazon, correct? We can find that there.
Right, for sure.
We'll put it in the show notes for everybody with the Amazon link so they can go right to the book to check it out. So let's talk about your recovery coaching. Are you working with men or women, or who is your specialty? Who is your ideal client? So when they're listening to this episode, that person can call you.
You know, I feel, I think it was because I was I was a bartender for so long. I've most, I would say most of my clients are women, although I target my previous self, if that makes sense. I feel like I could talk to who I was maybe 6 years ago a little more effectively, but that wouldn't show in who I actually work with. I actually do kind of, I'm able to bond with people quite well. And I think that is a silver lining of bartending. And for so long, I basically can have a conversation with anybody. And then also, there's no real, there's not a real pick in the fight as far as who I work with. And I would like to think that I could speak to who I was in my younger self, in my younger troubled days. But, you know, experience shows that anybody that's looking to maybe gain some exponential results in their life, like I want to help you find out what to do next, just by who you are, where you are.
So where can our listeners find you? What's your social handles? What's your website? Those kinds of things. And I know you have a free offer too.
Right. And so if you want to reach out on social, it's My Rock Bottom Recovery. It's a rather large community, 211,000 people there. Or you can go to my website to get some free resources at myrockbottomrecovery.com. So that's like kind of like a launch pad to where, you know, I guide somebody through 21 days of sobriety and of course physical exercise, right? Starting small, meeting people with where they're at. That's the name of the game there. You can email me, step@myrockbottomrecovery.com. Just reach out to me, and I'd love to hop on a call for free, of course, just kind of see what's going on with you, and even if I'm able to help, right? And I feel pretty confident that I'm able to help a lot of people at least get pointed in the right direction and gain some momentum.
Awesome. Well, we are out of time. I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your amazing journey. And listeners are going to love this story. And I have more questions now since we started the actual interview than I had when I started it. But I want to thank you for coming on. I'm Ryan Penley, everybody, and we'll put everything in the show notes for you to find him.
All right. I appreciate it so much. Thank you, Dr. Cali.
This is Unpause Your Life with Dr. Cali Estes. Until next time, give us a like and a follow, and tune in for the next episode.
Thank you for listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Cali Estes and Master Coach Jenny Fontana. Head over to www.thelifecoachmethod.com to learn more about coaching yourself and how to become a master coach.